Hello and welcome to the Armen Show Podcast, episode number 442. We have an author. We have the author of this book right here, Lost and Found, 9 life-changing lessons about stuff from someone who lost everything, Helen Chandler-Wilde, who is in London. Helen, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad to have you on. You have written this book. You are in London and represent the UK, which is a wonderful location that I am a fan of. Do you like the UK a lot? Is there other places in the world you would prefer in some way? What are your thoughts in the UK in regard to the rest of the world?
Yeah, the UK is pretty good. It's often said winning the lottery of life to be born English, and that is basically true. Although I do like America a lot. I've been to the East Coast and West Coast and many other places in between, and it's all great.
That's cool. I'm in Los Angeles, which relates a bit to the topic of your book from a recent happening. But before we get to that, tell us about the happening that led you to writing of this book. What happened in 2018, and how has that affected you in some way?
Sure. I at the end of 2018, I had to move out of the house I lived in because I had lived in it with my boyfriend at the time, and we parted ways. And then I obviously had to leave my home. So I didn't know where I was going to go. So I just put all of my stuff into storage, and I moved in with my parents for a bit. And then unfortunately, the storage unit where I'd put all of my stuff, except for just 1 or 2 suitcases with some clothes in, it burnt down and all of my stuff was destroyed. So I lost all of my furniture, like my bed, my sofa. I lost all of my books. As you know, I'm a writer. I had hundreds and hundreds of books. I lost all of my kitchen stuff, my pots and pans, plates, cutlery, and I also lost everything sentimental. So all of the letters that I'd got from family, including relatives who died, love letters, photographs, my birth certificate, all of my certificates for my degree, and all of that kind of stuff. Like literally everything was gone, except for those few suitcases that I had.
You mentioned sentimental items and a bunch of important items right there.
Yeah.
What were some of the first things that came to mind after that happened that you thought to yourself, oh no, I've lost this thing?
I think what a lot of the practical stuff was the most pressing, as you can imagine, because I needed to have a bed to sleep in, and that needed to be replaced very, very quickly. And also, like a kind of initial layer of all of your home stuff is so necessary. Like you need to have some cutlery to eat with, and you need to have at least 2 or 3 mugs to drink coffee out of in the morning. So that stuff actually was one of some of the most pressing stuff because it was incredibly expensive to replace all of that stuff and like very, very difficult to do. And then obviously just as important was the sentimental stuff. So I had in particular this like purple kind of shoebox thing, which I'd used to keep little pieces of paper and photos, which were nice memories through the years. So I had like ticket stubs, and I had been like really close to one of my uncles, and we used to write letters back and forth when I was a child, and I like lost all of those, and that was very difficult. And loads of photos just from through my life up to that point. And I'd lost loads of those. So just like lots of memories of me growing up and being young were just also gone. So yeah, so I think both categories of things were equally as difficult in some ways.
Makes sense. I have a couple of boxes of items that are really cool, and I just started setting up this bookshelf. So it has those, and then past photos, and
Yeah,
little trinkets. And it's nice to have those things.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it makes such a difference. It's just not home without them.
No, it is not. And we like to bring it spirit or color or like wood or patterns or things that make a home more interesting than if it's just walls of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree.
Now, you used a storage unit. You would normally think that a storage unit would be good to go because you
Mm.
put things there like, oh, these will be fine there. Were you surprised when that happened, or is it something that can happen?
Yeah, I was obviously very surprised because the number one thing you're paying the storage unit for is to keep your stuff safe, and they did not do that. I don't know what it's like in the US actually, but in the UK, a lot of storage units are just not very well constructed. So the one that I had my stuff in is not like a normal building that has brick walls. It's just kind of made of corrugated iron, and they're quite cheap buildings, which can make them super flammable. And especially with buildings, storage units are different than other buildings because in your unit it's usually packed to the brim with stuff, whereas in a room, obviously there's loads of space in the middle. But that unfortunately means when there is a fire, this stuff can burn much more quickly because there is just so much flammable material in such a small amount of space. And especially a lot of the things that people are storing there are just by their very nature pretty flammable. So furniture, obviously it's wood, books, important documents and papers, all those things are super flammable. So I think, it was an incredibly significant fire in London. And now I actually have spoken to a fireman who worked on it, who said it was the biggest fire he'd ever worked on, because you just don't think when a storage unit burns down, it will burn massively and for a long time.
Full of papers and all kinds of stuff that is flammable. That is something. We don't plan for those things, but I always think about that sometimes. Most of the things that are surprising in life are not planned for. If you see an accident on the side of the freeway, the chance that person put that in their calendar earlier in the day is very low. And that happened, and now they're adapting to it. And adaptability is an important part of our being. Connecting this to a somewhat current event, which is very palpable in the Los Angeles area recently, the Pacific Palisades and Altadena, both of them, a lot has burned, and a lot have gone through exactly what you described here, which is a bunch of their stuff. They didn't package it in some way. They didn't put it in a storage unit, but it was in their home, departed, and then came back, and now they're saying, wait a minute, a lot of my things that I've had for a long time are no longer.
Yeah.
Let's speak on the attachment to our things. Which things should we be attached to? Should we not have attachment? How much is what we own a part of our being?
Yeah, obviously it goes without saying that I'm so sorry for everyone who lives in LA, because it's just like beyond horrendous what's happened, and every single piece of footage I've seen of the fires has been like absolutely heartbreaking. Especially I've seen lots of videos of like people returning to where their homes were, which just are like so difficult to watch. I think especially for me, because it feels so real and like massive, those feelings, because I can remember that myself. And on top of that, in LA it's worse because you've lost your community as well. So your kids' school might have burnt down, or like your workplace. Like that is such a massive thing that's beyond your stuff, that is everything. So I think in that, it's not even attachment to your stuff, it's like your entire life is gone. It's kind of difficult to comprehend. And yeah, of course it's natural to be attached to your stuff. I think we can be really weird about it in some ways and think that it's just inanimate objects, which makes literally no sense, because we spend so much time and money on these things. Obviously they must have some meaning in our lives, otherwise why on earth are we doing that? And sometimes that can be like a massive practical thing. Like, as I was saying, I needed to have a bed to sleep in. It's natural to be attached to that. And also in the fire that I suffered, other people in the storage unit, again, it was their whole life that was in there. So there was a theatre company that used it for storage of all of their sets and costumes that they'd used for years and years. So that went, and so did their theatre company. So their entire future now looks totally different. Like, your stuff it can be your past and your attachment to all of your memories and your connection to other people and your like things that make you feel nostalgic, but it can also be your future, and the entire way that you choose to spend your life going forward can be affected by that. So of course it's a massive deal.
Very true. You mentioned a theater company there. I have known a costume designer. She has been on the show, and if her location went up in flames in that way, all those fabrics and everything would immediately combust. There's no shortage of items
like wrenches.
True. Gosh, thinking of the different places and how they burn, and also some of the footage in that some homes burnt and some did not near them, and so there's this weird discrepancy. But then if you go back to the home that's fine in some months, it'll be odd because everything else around you. So it's all
totally
kind of a thing together.
Yeah, it'd be like living in a ghost town. I've seen pictures of those houses and I've thought, are you really? You think you're lucky, but I mean, still your whole life is different and your whole town is gone. So yeah, sure, your stuff is still there, but your community is still lost, and that's like, obviously you're just as much of a victim.
It is true. One of the main cities, I had a bunch of students that I worked with that I actually went to those homes. So it's weird now because I've been in a lot of those homes, but they're not there. But I haven't seen them not there. So in my head, they're still there.
Yeah.
Good. And they will exist. But currently they're not there. So a lot of changes rapidly. But it is part of the ebb and flow of existence in that way.
Yeah.
And how much of what we own tends to be tied to self-esteem, or some people use it for continuity. Hoarding is described quite a bit in this book. How would you describe the psychology or what hoarding entails, what causes it in the first place? Any descriptions on hoarding?
Yeah, sure. So hoarding disorder is classified as a mental health condition. So it used to be subtyped as like a different kind of OCD or a symptom of OCD, but a lot of people now do consider it as its own mental health condition, because it does have very specific symptoms, which is totally different to how normal people collect things or own things. So I don't know in America, but in the UK, we had this phase in the noughties where we had loads of reality TV shows about people with hoarding disorder. I don't know if you had those. And like there would be, yeah. And there was this typical storyline that those TV shows had, which basically you go into a house and it's super full and there's someone in there who's clearly in distress, but they don't like how they are living, but they don't know how to fix it for some reason or another. And then they just basically get in someone who comes in and tidies it all up and throws all the stuff away. And then they say, okay, job done. And I spoke to some people for Lost and Found who had worked with people with hoarding disorder. And they just said that is literally like going to an alcoholic and just throwing away the booze that they have in the cupboard and then thinking you've solved alcoholism, which we would think that would be stupid. But so why do we not think the same about hoarding disorder? This is just like you've solved the immediate symptom, but you haven't solved what's going on there. So just with loads of other mental health conditions, hoarding can be a way of kind of dealing with difficult emotions, or some people use it. There might be a clear story of why they've done it. So in the book, I briefly mention an example of a woman who had been sexually attacked in her home, and she developed hoarding disorder after that, because clearly she's just trying to make herself feel safe at home by kind of creating a barrier around herself. So if you build up stuff around you, it might make you feel a bit safer, like that won't happen to you again. So yeah, I think everyone has a very difficult and strange and unusual relationship with the stuff they have, which might not make sense to everyone else. And I think hoarding disorder is basically just an extreme example of that, where it has turned into a medical condition, which might actually need some professional help as well.
This is a great point you bring up about how some of the things, hoarding or placement of items or creating barriers of some sort, is there as some sort of protection. And then you could point at the thing and say, well, we'll just clear those out, or let's just move this. But it was put there for a purpose. The actual issue in the mind is the more important thing.
Yeah,
or
totally.
Feeling safer, or being able to deal with the other people in a different way. Until that is resolved, those things are actually helpful for the time being.
Yeah, I think that with loads of things, if there's someone doing a behavior that you don't understand, there's often a reason for it, even if it looks really weird, and you kind of do have to find out the reason for it before you can solve it, because it's usually a way of coping with some other difficult feeling that they're having. So yeah, I think that lesson kind of stands for a lot of things.
Very important point there. Yes. Looking into the item versus from a disconnected view. Oh, that thing, that's no good. It's like if someone was stealing something and then you just went and say, okay, here, I put it back and now the issue is resolved.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Totally.
In that case, it's not so cut and dry in that way. No. Now, if we are a person and we have a lot of items, some people may have hundreds, who knows, thousands, whatever the number might be. How can that person get to something more along the lines of what is important in that group? Because I'm sure some of the recent people that departed and then came back, they would have done well if they had a section of things that really mattered to them and they took them, versus, oh, I better protect everything. No, I can't. And then come back and then, oh, it's actually those 9 things. How do you figure out the necessary items that are important to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think, the practical stuff, I think we can kind of almost leave that, because like so many things that are practical can be helpful, although actually my experience taught me that it wasn't as many things as I might have thought. and that you can get by with just a few basic things. But with your sentimental things, I think one of the biggest things is, I spoke to basically the world expert on nostalgia, and she talked about why nostalgia is actually a very good emotion for you a lot of the time. Even if we think it's often bad to dwell in the past, often if we have good memories of the past, that can be amazing for us, because it can make us feel more positive about the future if we're using it in a healthy way to think, oh, my life has been so good up to now, it will continue to be good in the future. And also nostalgia can really help us connect to who we were in the past, which is just like helps you to feel continuity with yourself and your identity. And the last reason why nostalgia can be really good for you is because it connects you to other people. So when I get together with my friends, we always reminisce about funny things that happened in the past, like, or things that were actually kind of terrible to happen in the past, which are now seem quite funny. I think this is like a supernatural way to bond with other people and to remember how close you have been for a long time, and helps smooth over any difficulties you're facing in the present. So I think with things, often things that connect us with our sense of the past and with those key things, so with our connection with ourselves and with our connection with other people, can be so important. So that's different for everyone, obviously. So things that make you feel like you, maybe it's like an item of clothing, or it's like, say, yeah, a certificate from when you went to university and you feel really proud of that. Those things can be so important. For me, like, I have a lot of like stupid trinkets in my house.
They're not stupid, okay?
I know. Some people think they're stupid. I don't really care. So I have like, you can't see, but it's just on the wall facing me over there. I have like all these cross stitches of different animals, and I personally love them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, exactly. There's a horse, a German shepherd, and a cat. Exactly. Great. 3 great animals. I love those things because they are like not perfect and they're quite silly, but I hope that the vibe I'm trying to create with my home in general is that it's not super serious, and you can come here and you can have fun and you can be yourself, and it doesn't matter if you knock a drink over or whatever, you're always welcome. And I think there are some things in my home that kind of help to show that to other people, and I hope like maybe say something about me to other people as well, and like help me express that. I think those things are so important, and things that connect us to other people as well are just so crucial. So just like I was saying with that purple shoebox with all the things inside, I loved that because that had like really silly pictures of me and my friends when we were young, and we used to be mega fans of this British band called McFly. Which is very funny now, but we had like all these signed CDs when we'd like gone to the signings and stuff, and that stuff, it kind of was a bit silly, but it was great because it's, at the end of the day, it's just amazing memories that I made with my friends. And just the same now, I've tried to recreate some, I obviously can't recreate them, but as some things as much as I can. So I've got lots of framed pictures around of people that I love. Because yeah, there's really like nothing that will actually make you as happy in life as your relationships to other people. So I want to be able to remember those as much as I can.
That's a cool move. No, have you heard about Helen's cross stitches that she has right there? Yeah, you're jealous, aren't you? Yeah, they're jealous right now, actually, of those. They should be. These are the cool things, right? These are the cool things. To me, those are the cool things, because silly is where there is some sort of lightness or fun or joy, and we go to silly. We don't go back to the whatever is the opposite of that and look back 20 years later like, oh, do you remember that page of the encyclopedia? I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example of the opposite, but we don't go to that. We go to the things that are not exactly perfect or have some sort of moment we attach
totally
to them. Something we like. Some people like a teddy bear. This one person, they had their house issue, and then they were like, where's my teddy bear? Because they wanted to see their teddy bear in some way. We connect to those, and so those are the things. So we have to be careful with those things. If we're a person that actually connects with those things, we have to be like, okay, this is a section for those. This is a box for that. I'm keeping this here. And if something's important to us, we have to attach the value to that, whatever it might be. It might be a drive with photos and videos you had from the last 10 years. And if you really value it, you would make like a backup drive and put it
Totally.
somewhere else, because you're like, I'm saying this is very important to me, this
Yeah.
random picture of me as a pumpkin or something. I wasn't
Yes.
a pumpkin, but some picture like that. So that's a key thing. We have to be very protective of those items, I think,
Yeah, I
that
agree.
are interesting or fun. Because who else will do that? If somebody else comes and they see your cross-stitched items, they might think, okay, and they might not know what it is. It might not. There's no meaning to them in that way. So it's not up to them to protect them or put them in a nice place or showcase them in some way.
Yeah.
This is a very important and practical point, and very timely, as I have my cool new bookshelf that I place
Yeah.
things and I put stuff in the bottom, and it's neat. Because when you have those things, that's what people remember when their house goes. Nobody remembers a wall.
Yeah.
The house, like the main parts of the house are the walls, wood, stucco, those things. But nobody is saying, oh, darn, the stucco on the outside. I
Yeah.
feel bad about that. But whatever, they set up a bookshelf or they set up something or they put their time and energy in something, that's the things they're like, how do I get that back? Or
Yeah.
us.
Totally, because it feels like you've lost part of yourself because you've lost maybe a representation of the years that you put into those things, and all of those times. So with the cross stitches, I say, like, one of them I bought in a junk shop near my house, one I bought in Cambridge in England when I was visiting one of my friends, and one I bought in Brooklyn at like an open air market. So like all three remind me of different times in my life, and they all have a story connected to them. So losing those is kind of losing the representation of that time in my life as well, which is a very big deal.
That's a good point there. You can have the same category from different experiences or times, and it represents more than it appears, because someone might think, oh, these three are from the same local shop down the street. I could get those too. Maybe it's not that. Maybe it's not that.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more to it in some way.
Yeah.
And then telling those stories is sometimes important, because then another person can join our world that we have, and that's a good part of connecting
I
with others.
completely agree with that. Yeah, I think that all of us, I think one of the things I learned in the book is that all of us all the time are trying to tell people who we are. Which sounds weird because obviously we have good relationships with our friends, but maybe, you know, the conversations don't always get onto super deep topics or whatever. And humans just naturally have a very strong need for self-expression. And I think that there is so much communication that you can do with things and doing it visually, or with stories connected to things that you have, which you can tell people. And I think it's just another way that we have of basically telling people who we are and of expressing ourselves. And it can feel quite freeing to be able to do that. So yeah, my sister, for example, she is a very talented artist. So you can't see, but that picture and that picture just behind me, she did. And that for her is like a very important way of expressing herself, which is not really, you can't really do through words. I am not an artist, I'm a writer. So, but for me, I find writing things down is a really important way of expressing, of expressing things that, you know, it's not as easy to say. So I think a lot of people use their objects as a means of self-expression, which is really important.
Strong point there about the different. Someone may do it through writing and it shows up there. Someone may do it through pictures and art and not through writing, and it'll only show up through the pictures and art.
Yeah.
And you have to hear it through that way, and then through writing, hear it that way. Some people
Totally.
neither one, and it might be through things they build.
Yeah.
Some sort of like wooden things, or maybe work that they do, or who knows what. So each of those is some sort of communication. Even rabbits communicate. We had a rabbit before, and I would talk to the rabbit the way it would move or hit the ground or something. That's the communication. So everybody's trying to showcase things in some way. And if we try to hear it, then we are listening. But if we don't try to hear it and we say, that's not the thing that I do, well, you just cut off like 90% of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, just on that note, one of the things I lost in the fire was my diaries from when I was a teenager, which is like, for me, one of the absolute worst things that could have happened, because that was like such an important mode of self-expression for me. And it's like losing a lot of those memories and a lot of those things that I can't really access again. So yeah.
That one is terrible. Long-lived diaries and journals.
Yeah.
Did you write like every day? Was it regular? What's your style in that?
I still write diaries now, or journals, and I tend to do it on a quite ad hoc basis. I write probably about 3 or 4 times a week in it, and it will just be things that occur to me or things which I find like are really, really important to note down, or to maybe I'm like, oh, this is a really interesting thought I'm having, but no one's here right now, so I can't tell anyone. So yeah, and I always take it when I go on holiday, and often I sometimes like when I go on vacation, and sometimes when I'm traveling alone, I write loads and loads, because it kind of is in place of when you'd have a conversation with someone else. You're having a conversation with your diary, which I really like to do as well.
Do you ever go back to sections? Do you look back at it nostalgically? Do you go look back at it like in a productivity view? How do you look back at it, or is it
I
just
look back.
you know it's there?
Oh, yeah, knowing it's there is definitely a big part of it, but I also do look back all the time. Because, and again, like, this whole book was written partly based on my diary entries at the time of the fire, because it's sometimes really difficult to remember exactly how you were thinking and feeling about something, even, 3 months later when your life has changed. So I find them very helpful for having that kind of resetting the tone of your thoughts, and being able to like tap back into that mental space that you were in. Especially when you're going through something bad, I find that once you're out of the initial state of shock, it's actually really difficult to remember what it was like at the beginning and how bad it was. Because I guess your brain just tries to make you forget as much as possible. So yeah, I look back all the time, and I find it incredibly helpful for anything I'm writing, or just sometimes to remind me of like, oh, I've come so far. My life now is so much better than it was. Yeah.
This is it. How many strong points you bring up is shocking to me, but each one is resonating in a large way. This one is big because, yeah, if you look at I have a creative writing journal that I had in like 12th grade, and then other journal entries at different times. And if I didn't see them, I would have forgotten that part of me. And then when I see it, I'm like, oh, excuse me, I would have forgotten that part of me. And then when I see it, I think to myself, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that fits in right here. Oh, okay. But if I didn't see it, I couldn't do that math, and I'd be like, oh, things happen kind of, but
Yeah, exactly.
there's such a disconnect if we don't have that. That's why having pictures and videos across time, or memories or screenshots or something along the way, is so valuable if you are the kind of person that is growth minded, or continuing to build on what you have done before.
Yeah.
Then you can build on that. I think it's not as big of an issue if you're more linear, because it's just, okay, that part, but I'm not really connected to that now. But if you're more of like a networking mindset, that's a big deal. You'll remember, like, I have this 1 year and a half of photos and videos that got corrupted on a drive. I still feel it. Like, some things are missing there.
Yeah.
What exactly was that? I can't fill it all in. But if I was more like tomorrow and the next day, I'd be like, okay, it's just some item that was not so relevant in that way.
Yeah. And I think it is weird, that feeling of when you look at an old photo and you think, oh, now I remember this, and I remember it so clearly, but for some reason, before I looked at this photograph, there's no way I would have remembered that. And it's almost as if you've like opened a whole new box of memories that were hidden in your brain somewhere. And it can be really a strange feeling, that. And it's also strange now, me knowing that I don't have those things that can open those memories. So I know they're in my brain somewhere. It's just I can't open them. I can't access them. And I think that's a really weird thing about not having your possessions anymore. It's like, I remember, but I'm not able to access the memories, which is bizarre.
Good news, we are doing a memory access item right here. Okay, the color blue, the number 24. What is coming to mind? That's good. Something would pop up. Darn. That's true. Some things are there, but a certain smell once in a while can make you remember a
absolutely.
certain
Smells
time.
are so strong. Like, I went back to my old high school a few months ago, and the smell of the corridor was exactly the same, and it was just instantly, I felt like I was 14. It was very, very weird, but I hadn't been able to feel that feeling otherwise. It was just that particular smell of the carpet for some reason. So
Now, how was it going back to re-attend high school?
So I was giving a talk. I promise I was not going back for class.
That's cool. That's funny. Right, you would see the place and you'd say, wait a minute. Or you might think it's smaller. I saw elementary school that I was at, and you're like, this was the big room?
Yeah.
It's not as large as it once appeared. One thing is in the title, there's lost and there's found.
Mm-hmm.
Lost is lost. In the found part, what can be found after the fact from losing items? Do you replace those items? Do you find a new self? Where does the found come into play?
So, yes, it's a good question. So I think one of the more straightforward ways of answering this is, just as we were saying with the practical things, in my mind beforehand, I had kind of categorized loads and loads of things in my life as necessities. So like things you needed your house to look a certain way, or maybe you needed all of these really specific kitchen gadgets or whatever. Or a lot of people, especially women, will, especially now with like we have more and more social media, and TikTok trends are absolutely crazy fast. They come and go. A lot of people will think, totally, will think that they like need to replace their clothes every season, which is crazy and just false. Or they think they need to throw things away, and it's just like, no, you can fix them. It's still fine to have. So I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was just knowing like most things I had, I didn't need them. So yeah, as just the basic things are basically fine. So even today, if you come and you open like the cupboards in my hallway, or you look in my kitchen cupboards, there's much less stuff than maybe there would be in a regular house, because I just like didn't replace a lot of stuff because I just didn't need it. And a lot of things, sometimes you might find yourself having 2 copies of something because you think, just in case I just never do that again, because I think I'm never going to use my home as like storage for things unless I'm just going to use it as the place where I live. So there's no point in keeping something just in case, unless that thing is like, say, your passport or whatever. Like if you need something, I just allow myself to buy it at the time that I need it, rather than waiting years, decades for this moment, which may never come. And that for me was a big one. But having said that, I think loads of things that maybe people wouldn't typically count in their necessities are actually necessities. Like, I think it's really, really weird to have an empty mantelpiece with no pictures on or ornaments on. Like that for me is never going to work, because it is a necessity to walk in through your front door and for it to feel like home. That is a necessity. So yeah, as you can see, I have pictures on my walls. That is necessary. It's necessary to live somewhere that looks like somewhat nice, and it feels also particular to you and like it's your home. So yeah, that would be one of the biggest lessons for me. And also now, I think that it can feel a bit weird still to this day being here, because I do, about like 5-ish years have passed now since I've started buying all my new things. So I have begun to buy things, have memories associated with them, just as we said, like with the cross stitches, they come from all these different places. But that doesn't mean it's like I've lost the kind of continuity with my life up to the age of 25 when I had the fire. So it kind of can feel a bit shallow, the amount of things that I have, because it's like doesn't have history beyond that. It's just the history randomly starts at that date. So it does reflect my past, but only a certain set of memories from my past, if that makes sense. So it feels like me, but maybe like not the entirety of me in a way.
I like how you described that. It starts from a certain point. Normally it would have had the whole extended framework.
Exactly.
But this one is like, instead of a line where it has 2 arrows at both ends, like there was before I can even remember, and then continuing forward. Now it's like a ray where it's a dot and then an arrow going forward.
Yeah.
And the dot is 2018.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, what happened in 2017? We don't know. What about 2016? We have no record of that. 2015 might not exist as a year. That's
Yeah,
something right
it's
there.
before the history book started for me, so I just don't know.
It's just back there somewhere. There's the pyramids were being built, but it only from 2018 towards the end of the main hype of internet social connection, but still going. But
Yeah.
it really did push hard in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. A lot of that. One thing you mentioned there, very valid in the book and right there, and I just recently talked with an AI about the just in case concept. Is I looked at it for phone contacts, like who to clear out, and it said if don't keep people just in case, you could back those up somewhere else. But if you haven't talked to the person in a year or 2 years, that just in case concept, I think this is a huge one, because you do that for phone contacts, you do that for things in the cupboard. So many sections in life, you'll have all this extra overhead for just in case, and it doesn't apply. Probably not in two realities will it apply, but it's there and it's taking up thought, and you're thinking you're doing more for what would be, but it doesn't need to be there. Send it out somewhere else, and 95%, 98% of the just in case doesn't even come close to becoming a thing.
I completely agree. I've got rid of loads of stuff. Like, I had some ski trousers because I went skiing once 15 years ago, and it's like, did I need to keep those? No. Like, if I go again, maybe I'll buy some, but like the fact that I haven't been in 15 years shows that this is not a good use of my space. So
time helps us in that way. If something is 1, 2, 3, 5 years out, it starts to showcase, oh, this is not a main, we're not using it daily, we're not using it weekly. It's not part of it. The hard work is in our daily routine, showing what we're not participating in already.
I think it can be quite the case with clothes, that one as well, because I think for me, I had like some of my clothes, which I do have from before 2018, because they were in those suitcases that I took with me. So for me, there was a point where I was like, you know, when you're at university, you go out all the time. Like, you go out, like, I don't know, 3-4 nights a week or whatever. And I had loads of going out clothes. And then there comes a point where you're like approaching 30, and it's like, I don't live that life anymore. I actually don't need all of these sequined things. I just, like, that era I can't tell you the exact date when that era ended, but I can tell you that it's over now. So it's time for me to let go of those things. And yeah, that for me has been a big one. Just like getting rid of loads of that stuff. And so, yeah, again, you just never really know maybe when that date it is that your life changes, but you know a few years afterwards that it's definitely happened. And that for me has been like a big source of like just in case purchases was around clothes. And again, understanding that has meant a big amount of just getting rid of stuff. And it's actually quite great. So the charity shop that I donate my clothes to, it sends you at the end of the year a statement which says how much money you raise for the charity through the stuff that you donated, because they put a tag on the things so they know who donated them. So it's really nice, because at the end of the year you think, oh, that was great. I've given basically a couple of £100 to charity, like a few $100s. And that was no effort to me, but I've helped those people, and there are other people out there enjoying my clothes. So it feels like such a win-win as well when you do it.
That's a nice added layer. Usually it's, here's some of my things and good luck.
Yeah.
Here's some of my things. By the way, those things you brought in, look at the impact you've had. People got it, and this was the amount for it.
Exactly. So it feels so good.
That's pretty cool. The point about the timing is good too. In life, we have certain times at certain things, and they might not repeat. There might be a time in somebody's life they play computer games, then later they don't play, but later they do playing hockey, but later they don't play hockey. And then you have a certain set of things for those times, and then they might not show up later, so then off they can go to the next person who does that thing, whatever that might be. It doesn't always need to be in our hands. Oh, we did that? We had that. I have these 14 different phases of things all saved here, ready to go. Are you going to do any of those? No, that was from before. Why are they there? I can't say, but if we somehow went backwards, maybe they're thinking they can go backwards in time at some point, then they will go back to snowboarding or skiing or something like that. That's true. clothes is a big one. You mentioned clothes a fair amount there. Are people tied to their clothes heavily? How can one sort their clothes by importance? What kinds of things can people look to with their clothes to organize? Oh, let's say I had to take 10 of them. These are the 10 I would save.
Yeah, I think this question obviously is very different for men and women who have like extremely different relationships with their clothes. Because for men, there just aren't as many options. So, and there's just much less chance to express yourself with your clothes because the clothes are kind of standard. But I think like, obviously I'm female, and for women, it is such a big, you have like this whole kind of palette of like almost paints that you can like draw pictures with, and say you can try on loads of different personalities with how you dress. And like you can look super chic and smart, or you can look super playful, and or you can look very creative, or whatever you want. So I think, and it does have this amazing ability to kind of set the tone for how you feel during the day. And also I looked in the book at some research that shows that how you dress does also affect how people treat you, especially for people who don't know you. So your first impressions do actually matter, and they do change how people treat you and the kind of person they think you are at first, and then once they get to know you, then it is different. But so I think, and your clothes like sit on your skin, on your body, like it is obviously a very intimate and close relationship that you have there. And it can also be tied up with loads of weirdness and like bad feelings if you think, oh, I can't fit into this anymore. It's like not a super pleasant feeling. And yeah, that's very reminiscent of like days of your life, like your wedding dress or the suit you get married in. That's obviously just so emotional and massive. And I know a lot of parents as well love to keep their baby's clothes even after they've grown out of them, because it's so like physical, and it really shows that memory of like, oh, I remember my child when they were this small. And it's like a way to feel so physically connected with another person as well.
Very valid. I like that you mentioned you did talk with a lot of researchers. I noticed that when I was reading the book. Can you tell a little bit about the experience of speaking with many different intelligent individuals along the way?
Yeah, it was very, very enjoyable, obviously. Very nice to I did a mixture of in person with people in the UK, and I did a lot of Zoom calls with a lot of Americans actually. It's just always like great to, people often feel very flattered when you reach out to them and ask to speak and talk about their research in depth, because it's so important to them, and it's really great to be able to like bring those insights that are just in academic literature to like a much wider audience, because it feels crazy that there's so many interesting things that are just tied up in like university journals when you could be like spreading it and helping people improve their lives with the knowledge that we have.
It's very important for writers, journalists, and others to take what is already there, sometimes just sitting there, bring it out into the public space, make use of it, discuss it, present it, and so it is alive, because the opposite of that is some encyclopedia in the library that's over there in the corner with dust on it, and it doesn't have efficacy in the public world that we're in.
Yeah, totally.
That's a neat one there. What is something that brings beauty to a household? We have described a little bit, but you talked about beauty a bit in the book.
Yeah.
Beauty to a household. What can make a household full of beauty?
Yeah, so I think beauty is one of those things that we're talking about that has quite a lot of research behind it. And we don't really talk about it, and people don't understand it widely, and we don't understand why it's so important. So I looked at some research about beauty and like mental health, and just like the importance of living somewhere beautiful and having access to green space, but not just green space, but like beautiful green space that's like tidy and clean is so, so important for you. And that connection with like plants and green stuff can extend into your home as well. I like, again, as you can see, I have a lot of plants everywhere in my house, which can be really important, not just because, you know, it cleans the air and stuff, but also because it's beautiful, and beauty like lifts your mood. It's, for a lot of people, might be connected to religious experiences or spirituality. But even if you're atheist, then there's still lots of research explaining why, from an evolutionary perspective, beauty is really important for you. As we said, you know, it's kind of weird that all humans like flowers, and like in every single culture around the world, we have art that has flowers. Like, there's loads of Islamic art with flowers. There's obviously loads of all still lifes from all across Europe that have flowers. Like, people are obsessed with painting flowers. Like, what is going on there? Women wear clothes with flowers on, men wear ties with flowers on.
What is going on here?
Yeah, what is going on? But there's a theory. I actually just like I just have a coaster with some flowers on just by me, which is like proves my point. But yeah, part of the theory is that humans are evolved to love flowers just looking at them because they're so beautiful. The reason for that is because they show you, in a few months, if you see a flower, you need to remember that to come back, because there will be fruit there, and that's great because we can eat fruit. So yeah, so that's just like one out of many examples of why we can be like entranced by beautiful things, and it will make us feel good. And like, why would we not use that in our day-to-day lives to make our homes feel good? And just like on a practical sense as well, if your space is beautiful, once again, it can really set the mood for how you feel. And you think, okay, I'm living in a home which is beautiful and it's great and it's clean. It doesn't have to be massive. Like, I live in a very small flat in London. It's not a big flat, but I try and make it look good because it teaches me an important subconscious lesson, which is that I'm good enough to live somewhere nice. And I kind of, if you have beautiful things, it's almost like you kind of need to live up to them. So, you know, if you feel bad, if you're like feeling slobby and in comfy clothes or in your pajamas all day, but like once you get dressed and like maybe tidy up your space a bit, you have so much more motivation to do other stuff because you've kind of set the tone with those things that you're like almost aspiring to. Yeah, I think it has like an incredibly profound effect on how you feel and on your whole actions and like all of your life, really.
We here at Flats R Us are a fan of your flat. You have paintings. You have the stuff in front that we can't even see. You have that plant, which is one of those cool plants that has the flowers the leaves that have the different color outside and inside.
Yeah, it's a variegated rubber plant, I think. Is what it's called.
I'm going to look up one. I might have one of those at some later time because they have the cool leaves.
Yeah, they're really cool, aren't they? Yeah, I know. It's kind of amazing that it's natural. It looks like someone painted it.
I've taken a picture of those leaves before in different places.
Yeah.
Because they're good like that. It's an important thing. The things around us, they energize us in some way, or they can pull us. And if they energize us, then we're refreshed. And I can do that thing. And maybe I'll try that. There's like a boldness associated with it that comes from it when it's there, but you can't see it until it's there. So you want to place things like a plant or books or things that connect with you. Mm-hmm. Or I brought this back. Like, look, isn't this cool? I don't know if you can see it. No, you can't.
What is it? A sign? Does it say Armen?
We've got made for me a long time ago. Armen.
Oh,
okay?
That's so cute.
I just put that there. So
that is so cute. I love it. Was that on your bedroom door when you were young?
It was not, but it could have been. And then later it sat back there. And then now that this is back in action, boom. And so.
Aww.
And it was made by a wonderful familial member. So that's
so nice. That's really, really cute.
You're like, oh, cool. And then it wasn't there for a long time because it was up there and like hidden. So it brings it to life. These kinds of things are joyous, and each one they add on to each other.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, they're like, how are you giving this speech to 12,000 people? Well, it started with this plant. There was a plant right there.
Yeah.
And then the plant said, go for it. And I said, okay, plant. We'll give it a go. And then there was 2 plants, and then I thought things are doubling. So we just started progressing forward. That's pretty good. It's true. These things are very valid in that way.
Yeah,
One
and
thing
I
that
think
comes to
just
mind.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, as you say, that like having a space filled with stuff you don't like can really drag on you as well. And also having space that feels like messy or cluttered, there's loads of research showing that is really not good for you. And it really does literally raise your cortisol levels and make you feel stressed because you just look around thinking, I have so much to do, this is awful. And it can also create this thing called visual noise, which is basically your brain is just like overwhelmed by the amount of things that it's looking at. And there's like almost too much information to process. So that it can genuinely make your brain just feel like more calm and happy when there's fewer things and everything seems orderly and to your taste, because nothing is like kind of dragging and pulling on your attention in that way.
How would you categorize your current setup in comparison to past setups as far as the upliftment of it? Is it in the upper quadrant, middle? Where would you place it as far as different?
Yeah, I think upper. I think my house is never, well, yes, from my flat. I always say my house. My flat is like never 100% tidy, but I'm fine with that. I don't have like so many things that it like looks overwhelming, but like everything I have, I basically adore. So, and also I, in a weird way, because I moved in here with like literally nothing. Every single thing in here I chose, which is pretty lucky, because it shows that like I like everything, because otherwise why would it be here? And also, yeah, in the last place where I lived, obviously I was sharing it with a partner, so half the things were his. And now it's different. Like this can be just mine, and that is very different.
It's interesting. If you adore a lot of the things in your location, that makes your place adorable.
Ah, thank you.
It has to be that. That's a good one. One thing here on writing. You are a writer. You have done various writings. How does that mode of expression work well for you? Why does it speak to you? Why has it spoken to you for a long time?
It's a very good question, and I'm one of those people that wrote a lot when I was a kid as well, and then I became a journalist and I wrote a lot obviously through that, and then I wrote a book. I think for me I think, as we're saying, it is definitely a form of self-expression, and there's a lot of conversations that you wouldn't typically have with anyone else that you can write about very freely. So a lot of abstract thought, which would be kind of weird and irrelevant if you brought up in a conversation with your friends. But in writing, you don't really need to have a reason. You can just say whatever is on your mind. I think that's very important. And again, I think it is a thing where you can create beauty, and there is something inherently satisfying about making a beautiful sentence that sounds nice. And for me, I actually I think maybe like something I love to do in writing, and I think something I'm drawn to and I feel like I can be quite good at, is writing metaphors and like finding images for things, which for me feels very satisfying just with the way that my mind works. It is very visual and concept driven, so finding two concepts that you can link together with a powerful image, it reshapes the way that you think about something, and allows you to consider it in different ways, which can be can be just interesting. And I think creating those like visual images as well with metaphor also can like help you remember things much better, is what, like, for me, because I do have a very like visual mind. I think it surprises people. I'm not someone who has an internal monologue in the sense of it being speech driven, which surprises some people because I am a writer, but mine is more like concept and visual driven, and I think trying to reflect that in writing can be good. And I think writing is an amazing way of communicating between people, all different kinds of ideas that are difficult to get across in speech. And also you can communicate with people across time, which is also very powerful. And I would love the feeling that, you know, my like great grandchildren could read the book that I'd written and get to know me in a way which I could never be able to meet them myself. So yeah, that's like half the reasons.
That's it right there. Some of those items relate with me quite a bit. Thinking in metaphor and then abstract thought. Those two highly relate with me. But then the visual thinking, I think I'm not as much. I'm more of the internal monologue and
Yeah.
speech driven. But that's a big one, having that metaphorical mind. Oh, I'm going to piece these two together. See what these two connect here. That means
Yeah.
that this is similar to this. It tells you a lot of things all in one little set, which is cool. Do you know any of your Big Five or Myers-Briggs or any of
Yes.
those? What might you be in those categories?
My Myers-Briggs type, I'm an ENFP apparently.
ENTP.
Okay, that's pretty similar. So maybe if people don't know what that is, it means extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and perceiving, which basically means like some of those words mean what they sound like, but some don't. But if you look it up, I think it's I personally think it's a very interesting. And then in Big Five, I tend to be quite high in openness, maybe medium in conscientiousness, high in extroversion, high in agreeableness, and like medium high in neuroticism as well. So yeah.
That's cool. That gives me a good sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm similar in some of those, but then my agreeableness is lower, even though it doesn't showcase. And then my neuroticism is also non-existent, but my
Yeah.
extroversion is high. And conscientiousness is also, let's say, mid, maybe. And
Yeah.
then openness, I think, is up there.
Yeah.
So it's somewhat similar. But I always, when I met ENFP types, get along great. It's like a good high energy or good
Yeah.
energy pairing of sorts. So that's a cool one there. It was always helpful to know this for myself and understanding others.
Yeah,
more so
yeah.
Many years ago. But that's a cool one right there. That's a cool one. Likely to
Yeah.
do improv, by the way. Whenever I think of ENFP, I think of somebody going on stage and doing some improv.
I've never
That's
done
one of-
improv, but I did do a lot of acting when I was a kid, and also I did a lot of speaking, which I guess is a form, like public speaking, which is a form of improv. It's just like some jokes, but maybe not as many. More arguing.
Makes sense. What do you think you're doing? Not
Yeah.
much. Okay, well, do more. Okay, I'll work on it. That's pretty good. It's a style. My style is a little bit more comedian and less likely to be improv.
Yeah, yeah.
So a little bit different.
And I love watching
funny.
improv. I watch a lot of improv.
This makes sense. You have no choice based on the way you're thinking about things. There was no option there. It had to be improv. And that was the only way to go on that. Personality's always been a big thing to me. So understanding it or figuring that out for self and others is always,
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting.
it stays for a long time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
One question I always like to conclude with is if you had a message to people that they might take away from this fine book right here, Lost and Found, what would that message be for them?
I think it would be to be almost quite selfish with the things you own, and as much as possible to just completely ignore all messages you're receiving on what you should own and really just focus on what you want to own, which might be surprisingly much less than you think. And it just, to me, it makes no sense to turn your home, which is the most intimate place, which is just for you, and it's just you who is paying for it, and it's meant to be where you feel safe and secure. It feels very weird for me to use that as a space to like show off to others and signal messages to others. I just think it should be like as much you as possible, and you should feel great there. So if you really like, I don't know, comic books, whatever, like showcase that. Why not? Like, why would you not? Life is incredibly short, and I think that also our stuff can have like such an enormous cost, both in material cost if we're buying a load of things we don't want and we can't afford, and also in our time cost. Like upkeeping things, looking after things, washing things, dusting things takes such an insane amount of time. And there's also a hidden time cost of all, if you're buying expensive things, the amount of working you've had to do to buy that is also crazy. And I think we've just got to make it work for us. And that can mean being very ruthless about getting rid of some things that we shouldn't have or we don't want to have.
Very strong life and living messages for your day-to-day, your home, the places you're in. Because we spend a lot of time in the places we are usually at. We're not always out everywhere else. And so those places, we want them to be full of ourself.
Yeah.
Ourself and showcasing in that way.
Totally.
Strong messages and timely messages currently.
Yeah.
Which was not planned. This happened in 2018. Then you wrote it. Then things sometimes
I know.
things match up.
Yeah, it's an absolutely crazy time for the book to come out in America with the fires. So I hope it resonates with some people.
I hope so as well. Helen Chandler-Wilde, I would like to thank you for having joined on this episode of the show, sharing a bit about your new book and informing us about daily living, showcasing ourselves, and making our home more beautiful and full of life.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Glad to. And we are out.